Jobs are up. Inflation is soaring. Are we heading for a recession? You hear these headlines all the time, right? The economy feels like this crazy roller coaster of ups and downs. But what if I told you there's actually a natural rhythm to all this chaos? A kind of logic behind the madness? Well, let's get into it.
It all boils down to a couple of huge questions. First, why don't the good times, those economic booms, just keep on going forever? And on the flip side, why do the bad times, recessions, eventually end? Turns out, the economy has this amazing built-in system for finding its balance.
And to really wrap our heads around it, we're going to use a simple analogy. Just think of the entire economy like it has a thermostat. It sounds basic, I know, but it's an incredibly powerful way to see how all these moving parts actually work together. Okay, so let's start with the most important part of any thermostat, that ideal temperature you want to set. This is what we can call the economy's set point.
In economics, this ideal temperature has a name. It's called potential output. You'll often see it written as Y star. Now, a really key detail here is that potential output isn't the absolute pedal-to-the-metal maximum the economy could possibly produce. Think of it more like the maximum sustainable speed. It's the fastest you can run the economic engine without it overheating with rising inflation. It's that perfect, comfortable, long-term sweet spot.
But just like the temperature in your house, the economy almost never stays at that exact perfect setting. It's pretty much always running a little too hot or a little too cold. So when the economy's actual output is higher than its potential, we call that an inflationary gap. The room is too hot. The economy is literally running beyond its sustainable capacity. But when the actual output is less than potential, we're in what's called a recessionary gap. The room is too cold, and the economy is seriously underperforming. And this isn't just some abstract theory, This has real-world consequences. When it's too hot, companies are pushing their factories and staff past normal levels, they're scrambling to find workers, and all that gives employees a ton of bargaining power to ask for higher wages. On the other hand, when it's too cold, it's the total opposite. Sales are down, profits are hurting, and there are way more workers than available jobs, which puts a lot of downward pressure on wages. But this is where things get really interesting. Just like a thermostat automatically kicks on the AC when it's too hot, or the heat when it's too cold, the economy has its own automatic adjustment mechanism. That's right. Like a good thermostat, the economy has a built-in way of correcting itself. It's this amazing thing called the adjustment process, and it's always working in the background, trying to nudge that temperature back to the ideal set point. So how does this actually work? Let's just walk through it. Say the economy is too hot. We have an inflationary gap. Okay, step 2. Companies start competing like crazy for the few available workers. That leads to step 3. Workers have the upper hand and wages start to climb. Now, for the companies, those higher wages mean higher costs to produce everything. So what do? They eventually raise their prices, which starts to cool down customer demand. And that's the final step. The economy naturally cools off, and output starts to drift back toward its sustainable potential. It's a completely natural process. But, and this is a big but, there's a catch. And it's summed up perfectly by this idea. In economics, this is sometimes called downward wage stickiness. I mean, think about it. In a boom, when companies are doing great, wages can shoot up pretty quickly. But in a recession, they fall very, very slowly, if they fall at all. It's a whole lot harder for a boss to cut someone's pay than it is to give them a raise, right? So the big takeaway here is this. No matter how hot or cold things get in the short term, that potential output, that Y star, it acts like an anchor. It's always there, constantly pulling the economy back toward its long-run, stable equilibrium.
Okay, so the system can fix itself, but what if we don't want to wait for that to happen? What if we want to give the whole system a little nudge?
Well, that's where something called fiscal stabilization policy comes into the picture. This is basically when the government decides to step in and use its tools. We're talking things like government spending projects or tax cuts to try and close those output gaps way more quickly. It's like someone physically walking over to the thermostat and cranking the dial themselves. And this, right here, brings us to one of the biggest, most timeless debates in all of economics. Do we trust the automatic system to do its job, even if it's slow? Or do we grab the controls ourselves and try to speed things up?
As you can probably guess, it's not quite that simple. You see, trying to manually control the economic thermostat is incredibly tricky, and the main reason why comes down to one word: delays, or as economists call them, lags.
This timeline really illustrates the problem perfectly. Let's walk through it. So at time 1, some kind of economic shock happens. A recession starts. Then you've got the decision lag.
That's the time it takes for politicians and economists to even realize there's a problem and then agree on what to do about it. Next up is the execution lag, the time it takes to actually pass a law and get the money flowing. And finally, you have the impact lag, the time it takes for that spending or tax cut to actually ripple through the economy and have an effect. By the time the fix finally kicks in, the economy might have already started correcting itself, which means your well-intentioned policy could actually overshoot the mark and make things worse.
This whole issue gets at a really fundamental tension in economics, the huge difference between focusing on the short-term weather versus the long-term climate. And there's probably no better example of this than a wild idea called the paradox of thrift. It's this totally counterintuitive concept that says what's a smart decision for you as an individual, like saving more money, could actually be a bad thing for the entire economy, at least in the short run.
Let's break this down. In the short run, the weather, if everybody at the same time decides to save more money, that means everybody is also spending less. That big drop in spending can crush overall demand and actually make a recession even worse. But in the long run, the climate, all that extra saving doesn't just disappear. It gets funneled into investment. It funds new businesses, better technology, new factories, and all that investment boosts the economy's long-term capacity. It literally increases its potential output. So what's bad for the immediate weather can be fantastic for the long-term climate.
So at the end of the day, we are left with this enormous question. When the economy is out of whack, when the thermostat is on the fritz, do we trust its own automatic controls to eventually get us back to that comfortable temperature? Or is the pain of a long recession or of runaway inflation just so great that the risk of doing nothing is even bigger than the risk of grabbing the controls ourselves? That is the constant, difficult choice.